So we're exactly holding. We were holding by this, which the Alter Rebbe quotes, "Atu atcholei nivra ha'olam, atu mishnivra ha'olam," which was supposed to be again explanation on this medrash. How the medrash equates the Anechi Hashem Leikecha, or all the mitzvahs I say to Anechi Hashem Leikecha, and all the mitzvahs leises of the Avedis Leil Chalikim Acherim Alpani, the idea of Avodah Zarah, its original sense. Which again, we explained before that every Yid by innate nature would give up his life for the mitzvah of Avodah Zarah, not to violate the mitzvah of Avodah Zarah, idolatry. So he introduces this, the notion of Achdus Hashem, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he brings, which we say every single day in davening, Atu Atcholei Nivra Ha'olam, Atu Mishnei Nivra Ha'olam, that you are Hashem, you created the world prior to you are there prior to Hashem created the world, and you are the same Eivishter after after you created the world. And we ask the question, what is this really telling us? What are we saying over here? Actually, we went even into this idea at length in the last class, but just to recap this, in order to go to see the flow, that it's not saying that Hashem, you're there before, you're there after. Why would we think Hashem went away? So we say that it's much deeper than that. The message is that just like before Hashem created the world, what was there? Only God. Because there was no world. Right? Before Hashem created the world. So what is there? It's only God. Even after you created the world, there's no two entities. There is, in the end of the day, only God as well. Which tells us, when we say there's only God, so there's no, when we say there's no other entity other than God, it says, like we brought from last week's Parsha, the difference of Keil Ha'olam and Keil Olam. The God of the world, or Keil Olam, the God world, meaning to say literally, to loosely, or literally translated. Which is Keil Ha'olam, Hashem is God over the world, means to say right away you're saying there's a world. There's a separate entity. He's in charge of the world. So the world, it says, Yesh le tfisat makom, it has some significance, or significance not in the context of meaning, but it is something. You see someone is in charge of something, like you put two people in the room. One is in charge over the other. There's no question that even the one who's in charge doesn't feel the same if he's himself in the room or with someone else in the room. Or the person, any person would walk into the room. There is certain tension, even though the one who's in charge over the other. Nonetheless, you can't say the other one doesn't exist. He exists, and if it's a small room, it would make people uncomfortable. So the person who is being dominated by the one who's in charge, let's say, he can't do anything what he wants, and everything he's totally dependent to the one who's in charge, and he can't speak, but you can't say he doesn't exist. To say he's not there, he is there. He takes up space, and he takes up concentration. If people walk in, it's another entity in the room. So he has no will of his own, but he's still there. It's something. So when you say Keil Ha'olam, Hashem is the God of the world, you say, okay, the world is there. If it's there, so let's respect it to some degree. Okay, it doesn't have any of its own independence. Hashem is in charge, but it's a mitzias, it's something. When you say Keil Olam, not Keil Ha'olam, but Keil Olam means say the world itself is part and parcel of God. Like the Lashon, in other words, there's before Hashem created the world, there was only God, the way He wanted to be worldless, without a world. After Hashem created the world, He wanted Himself to have a kind of a garment which is called the garment of world, but it's not a separate entity. Alter Rebbe brings later an interesting example of Kadin Kamse de Levushim Minei Ubei, like I remember I always thought it was like a turtle. But then I heard the concept, maybe it's a snail. I have to see how it exactly translated. It's irrelevant. That you look at let's see, you could use a snail, but let's say a turtle. Actually, I was my kids once in one of the it was a smaller zoo, and suddenly my kid says, "What was that brick? That hard brick?" So I turn around, I see it was the back of the turtle. He says, he was like supposed to be turtle. He says, no, there's a brick. There's something like a little brick piece inside. No, so that's the back of the turtle.
You mean the shell?
The back shell. Right. It was so hard. Yeah. It was so hard that it took a moment to notice that under it there's a turtle.
Yeah, because the turtle hit.
Right. But the top of it is very hard.
Yes.
It's like hard like a brick. Almost.
Yeah.
In other words, it doesn't seem like, that you don't feel the flesh or the
Right.
That's what I mean. And when you feel someone's flesh and blood, something is alive.
Yeah.
So you see the fact, the fact that the indication of him being alive or rather the fact that he's a live person becomes very obvious. It doesn't feel like a table. It feels like someone's alive. So where does his life begin, or to what degree does it extend itself? Well, everything about him. You touch his finger, you see, you feel it's warm, or it moves, or whatever it is. You see some life, even its flesh and blood, right? You look at the back of the turtle. It's so hard. You don't identify that. You say, well, someone just blast some plaster over it and be dried up over the turtle because it's so solid, it's so hard. No, but the levushim mineu bay. No, that's part of the turtle. It's similar to the snail. That hard part, it's ultimately part of the snail. It's not something which is over it and it's a different entity of it. Similarly, when Hashem created the world before, without the garment which is called world, now he put on a garment. In other words, the garment is ultimately mineu bay. It's part of the Eibishter, which means ultimately to say that the world is really a non-existent entity. You can't say there is a world and there's God. If it's part of an extension of God Himself, the way Hashem expresses Himself and becomes manifest in a world, right? Like you say, the garment, it doesn't look like God. You look at the world. What was in this place before Hashem created the world? There was only God. To illustrate it exactly, we can't, right? We can never illustrate in our minds in no form or fashion a situation, a state which is no world, because we're part and parcel of the world, a place which is basically the classification of Eilam is Zman u'Makom, time and place. Before the Hashem created the world, there was no time. There was no phenomenon of time. So what was it? The clock wasn't ticking? We can't imagine it because we're part of this reality which is comprised of time and place. So what does it mean, a world without, or a situation without a world? Like people say, what was it, just hollow, or just a long field? Or something? No, a field is part of the world. Was it a desert? And a desert is also the texture, or the makeup of a desert is one dimension of the world is desert. So it's part of Eilam. A situation without what we can't perfectly imagine, but ideally we can understand. Before, there's only God. There wasn't a world. What was in this room? There was only God. What is in this room now? The answer? Only God. If you see a table and you see chairs, this is the way Hashem presents Himself now with the garment of chairs and table. It's a little bit. I was once learning with this. We had it before also in Perek Dal Gimel. Kula kamei kilo chashiv. If you think about it deeply, then it could arouse a real awe, a real fear, because right over here, in this very room, it's the same state as prior to Hashem created the world. If you say there's okay, He's in charge, but He's not really part of it, or He's not here the same way. What would be the state of a person? Let's say he walked into that reality of only God before Hashem shed Bereshit, but he would have been consumed into the infinite of the light of Hashem. He'd be burnt into the infinite energy of Hashem. Because there's only God? Like, what am I doing here? Just like, because how could you be in the presence of God? What the Pasuk says, Rebbe brings it later, chapter 33. In other words, how could you stand in the presence of God? But now, after Hashem created the world, it's the same reality. It's only God. So we think about it deeply, really, it does, and it's supposed to. This holy Zbeinanus, this whole type of Hitbananut is really supposed to arouse with the Yid a certain pachad. The Eibush is right here. He's looking, and he's mabit olav. He's looking at me, and he knows perfectly my thought, speech, and action, what I'm doing, and so on. Or b'chalal, the whole pachad Hashem, reverence of Hashem. So not to go away from the message over here of the Alter Rebbe. Again, he's not speaking particularly now about Yiras Hashem, but consequently, it would bring Yiras Hashem, the fear of God, knowing that Atu Achaleni V'Reilim, Atu Mishini V'Reilim, it's the same God which is right here, even after He created the world. There's no two entities. So once we know that, so this is the message of Atu Achaleni V'Reilim, Atu Mishini V'Reilim. So it means Pirush Mamish Hu Mamish Belishum Shinui, without a change. I wasn't impacted. Now, when you say Ani Hashem L'Shinisi, do you have it in the text? You see it inside the Are you following inside?
No, I'm listening.
You're not? Okay. Just to make sure that you have the... I mean, I'm not compelling anybody to look inside, but I just want to make sure that you have the right, you have the ability to do so. Maybe I gave you... Do you have the page beginning being stated?
Yes, that's one.
You have that? Okay,
Yes,
so that's the
one.
Atu, right? You too? Yeah. Atu belishum shinui. Yeah, you have it. You have it here. Ani Hashem leishonisi, which means who mamish. Like it says, right? We're following. Hashem Himself. Where is it? Mamish, right? Belishum shinu, without any change. Ani Hashem leishonisi. The page again begins, been stated simply.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, so the Pirush Hu Mamash. Okay, that's good. It could be that doesn't follow, but we're holding definitely on top. Good.
Okay, that's where I am.
Pirush Hu Mamash, Hashem Himself, Lishum Shin, without any change. Like it says, Ani Hashem Lishanisi. I didn't change. What means I didn't change? When someone builds a building, for example, it's inevitable that he was impacted by building the building. There's no such a thing. It's impossible that someone should build a home or a building, an important enterprise, an important investment, and he should walk away. Wasn't impacted at all. Just simply cannot be. It could be that one person could be impacted less than another person. Could be because this person builds many buildings in his life, and this person put in a whole life's investment in building one building. Certainly the latter person is impacted more than the first. But you can say that he's not impacted at all. That's impossible, because he's impacted the way it looks and how his plan unfolded, the investment, the payroll he had to pay for the people he built to build the building. It was something which took place. It took his time. Let's say it took him a year and a half to build it. That year and a half made an impact. Inevitably made an impact on him, because he had to invest part of himself, and namely in this context, the building is an entity separate than himself. So because it's an entity separate than himself, therefore inevitably it made an impact on him. Let's just take as opposed to, let's say, does it make an impact of a person? Does he feel, let's say, of his breathing? A person breathes thousands of times every single day. Sure, it makes an impact on him in every breath, and ultimately, this is every day a person lives. Again, it makes a change in his overall, in his status as a human being. That's what people age after many years and so on. But you could say in the end of the day that I invested thousands of breaths today, therefore I'm tired of breathing. Made an impact on me, and so I'm tired of breathing because I invested. It's not one out of thousands of breaths. It doesn't. Usually it's not so. A healthy person is not so. Why? Because you're breathing. That's who you are. That's an extension of you, or that's your life. The building which you build is not you. It's something else out of yourself. So inevitably you had to go out of yourself to deal with another reality, which is called building a building. Again, a payroll, and the aggravation is coming out good, and the time and the rain when it's building. All these different details. You ask a builder, not sure, right? There's important details he has to invest of himself because he's building something else. And it's because he's building something else, so inevitably it makes an impact on the person. When it comes to God, one would say, well, Hashem didn't just build one edifice, He built the entire world. A world which is a completely complex world. With a million buildings, wouldn't even touch the tip of the iceberg, right? In comparison to the complexity of creating a world. And yet we say, Ani Hashem Lishanisi, I wasn't impacted. And I'm the same. And the answer is because the world is not a separate entity that other than Hashem. It goes along with what we said before. Because it's not a separate entity, it would be similar to someone breathing. That's who he is. So you could say, oh, that's who you are. Well, I heard the breathing. I saw you. I saw your expressions when you were breathing. You could see a lot of things happening. And you could say when a person doesn't breathe, theoretically, let's say, I didn't see that, and now I saw you breathing. But it doesn't mean that something new happened. On the contrary, this is part of who I am. And the better I breathe, the more healthier I am. Same thing when someone builds a building because it's an entity separate than himself, inevitably makes an impact on the person who builds, because I have to go out of myself and deal with something else. When it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the world, everything Hashem created, He didn't go out of Himself to do something else. It's all part of Hashem. So there's no reason He should be impacted by the fact that He created not only one world but many worlds. Gan Eden, Elam Haba, Gan Eden Tacht, different levels of Gan Eden. But it says there's not only these few worlds which we know, there's infinite amount of worlds, it says. Generally divided and compartmentalized. Natzilus, Bri, Tzira, Asiya, which we mentioned a number of times. The different famous four worlds brought in Kabbalah and Zer. But all the elements, all these supreme elements which Hashem created, which are greater than even the elements. This is the lowest world Hashem created. But even this world we can understand there's so many, it's such a complex world. But from this world we can understand also in the Eilam Esaliyena, because ultimately it's not Hashem went away from something to create something else. It's ultimately part and parcel of Hashem. So there's no impact. Hashem is not at all impacted. That's why He says, Ani Hashem Leishanisi. Well, in the simple meaning in the Tanakh it has another meaning, but in the way the Alter Rebbe explains it, I did not change. Which is again tantamount to what we said before. If it's another entity, then you can't say that it's the same God before He created the world, after He created the world. If it's a separate entity. Because before Hashem created the world, there was only God. Now Hashem created the world. There's a God, a world, a God, and a world. Hashem is in charge, but there's a God and a world. So then you cannot say, Leishanisi, I didn't change, because there's something else additional to the yourself. But we say ultimately, Atahu, it's the same God before Hashem created the world, the same God as after Hashem created the world. Just before Hashem created the world, there was only God, and now after Hashem created, there's still only God. So what is there to make a change in Him? There's nothing to make a change in Him. And Hashem Leishanisi. And he says, again, all the supreme worlds, do not make any impact in the oneness of Hashem. And again, in this context of something else other than Hashem, which we mentioned, as we mentioned last week, the message of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, is not that there's only one God. That's not the message. The message that everything is God. A different message, a totally different message. Because you say there's one God. What are you negating? There's no two gods. That's not the proclamation of Hashem Echad. Hashem Echad, there's only one. So that's what he says. Because there ain't Pelim Shemashini B'Achdusa Yisbarich B'Hibarim, when Hashem created the world, there's nothing else other than Hashem. So you have the oneness of Hashem before Hashem created the world. You say have the same exact oneness after Hashem created the world. So when Hashem created all these supreme elements, there's no change or impact in Hashem's oneness. Mi'ayin liyash, even Hashem creates from a state of nothingness to a state of being. And the answer is because shekimei shahayahu levadei hu yachid u'miyuchad kedim ibaram. Just like, in other words, even Hashem creates the world from a state of nothing, right? Ex nihilo, when Hashem, that's from a state of nothing to a state of something. So apparently, it lacks now the oneness of Hashem. So before Hashem created the world, I could say He was one, because there was nothing else. But now apparently there's something else, so you can't say Hashem Echad, it's all one. He says no, there's no change, there's no impact with Hashem. Therefore, even after this world, it doesn't interfere with Hashem Echad, because there is nothing else other than Hashem. Even when you find Eilam Esaliyena and Eilam Satachtain until this physical world. So you say, why? Because just like Hashem was only one before He created them. So to Hashem is the only entity even after He created them. Because everything in the face of Hashem is completely insignificant, and they're like totally remain in a state of nothingness. Completely, even after He created them, they're not teifas mokim. They don't take up any place, because ultimately they're there just because Hashem is there, and they're mere extension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like somebody saying, "I'm having a hard day because my hand is taking up too much place, and I'm a little uncomfortable because my hand is taking up the space." It's not a normal, healthy thing to say. The hand is you. If God forbid the person Chas v'Shalom didn't have a hand, that would be the problem. But the hand is who you are, so you cannot be uncomfortable, or for that matter, let's say better, sometimes a person has feeling, or he, the famous saying that a healthy person does not feel his limbs. The moment you start feeling your limbs, you know there's a problem. The person's not healthy. When you feel your back, that you have a back, that's a problem. Because yourself doesn't take up any place, and doesn't have any significance, because it's all about you. It's not that it's not any significance, it's not important to you, it's very important to you. But it doesn't have any, it's not a entity which should say I'm comfortable with it or I'm not comfortable with it. Because the more you don't know about it, that says more that it's a healthy you. Similarly to say, Hashem, there's a world, you're in charge, but there's a world. Doesn't that take place by you? Doesn't take a little space in your existence? So it's not, you're not truly one, you're in charge, so maybe there's, to some degree, there's oneness, your oneness dominates, but it's not only one, it's not only you, there's a world, and maybe it takes up a little of your space. The answer is because it's part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it's completely insignificant. But not insignificant in the sense that there's no meaning ultimately for the reason Hashem created the world. Insignificant meaning that it's all part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it doesn't have any independent significance. Which again, similar to the example, it's a healthy person which if he's truly healthy, his hand not only doesn't take up any place, he doesn't even feel his hand. Again, the moment you feel your hand means say the hand is not healthy. So it doesn't. Why don't you feel it? Apparently, this is part of you. And the answer is, it's so part of you that you don't even give it any significance. It's not a separate entity. That's the same word. In front of the Eibishter, all the worlds which created are completely insignificant. Why are they insignificant? Doesn't mean they don't have no meaning. Elam Haba has a meaning, and Elam Hazeh has a meaning. It means they don't take up any place because it's a mere extension of Himself. That's who He is. So that's what he's saying. So they're mamish. Because the creation, the emanation of all the worlds, the supreme worlds and the inferior worlds, from a state of ayin to a state of yesh, from a state of nothingness, the way they were before Hashem created the world, to a state of something. In other words, the way we see it as a yesh, the way we see it as an entity, and their vitality, the living force, which manifests or which invests into them, in their existence, in other words, that energy which gives it existence, that they should not turn to be back to the original state of nothingness, the way they were. It's only the reason why they exist, it's only because the godly energy which is in them. So pull out the godly energy. When you pull out the godly energy of this table, what is it going to look like? Not a broken table. You pull out the godly energy of this table, there is no table at all. So what are you going to say, that this table is a... Alter Rebbe says it looks different than the example we gave, which I believe this example which we gave also illustrates this, but to stick to the Alter Rebbe's example means when Hashem creates this table, which seems to be now there's two entities, there's God and this table. But the answer is no. If God pulled out His energy from this table, it wouldn't be, like we said, a broken table, it'd just be no table at all. So the whole existence of the table is just God Himself, God's energy. So this table is ultimately part of the Hashem Echad, part of God, which again says the same message. It's all synonymous with the message that ultimately the world, or we're looking at this table, is just a mere extension of Hashem. The whole reason why it exists is because right now Hashem is providing energy to the table. Hashem pulls the energy, pulls the plug, or pulls the energy. When you say pull the plug, it's not so, right? You have a tape recorder. It's playing. It's entertaining the whole crowd. 100 people, they're dancing. Pull the plug, it definitely makes an impact on everybody. But did the tape recorder disappear? No. Because it has its own independent existence. You pull the plug, so the energy is there's no energy coming through this device, and therefore the tape, the disc, you can't turn in the same, whatever, ultimately which makes the music to play, so it has an impact on everybody. At the end of the day, it's a separate entity. The plug, in other words, the energy which is coming from the outlet is not creating the tape recorder. The tape recorder is a separate entity before you plug it. It just needs a certain energy in order to make the tape or the disc to play, in order to produce this music, or to have the music, and it has its own volume and so on and so forth. Or the volume is irrelevant if there's no energy which is coming through from the outlet, which is coming ultimately from the generator. But the energy which is coming from the generator and finally through the outlet, that doesn't create the tape recorder. The tape recorder is a separate entity. Therefore, you pull the plug, the tape recorder won't disappear. It won't produce, but it won't disappear. Hashem takes out the energy of the table at this moment, the table would disappear. So every part, every detail of the table is ultimately Hashem. It's ultimately Hashem's energy. It's not like Hashem cut out the middle of this table, put in energy, so the energy is making this table just exist. If you pull it out, it's going to decay, it's going to rot. No, when you say it'll disappear, it means every detail of the table is Advar Hashem, is the extension of Hashem, is the energy Hashem is pumping into the table. So the whole reason the table exists is because Hashem right now wants to pump in energy into this table, but the table, saying that itself says the table has nothing of independence on its own. Therefore, it's not a contradiction to the Achdus Hashem, or it doesn't interfere when we speak about the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to say, well, before you created the world, there was no table, so you were one. Now you created the world, you're there, but there's also a little table as well. No, the table doesn't exist because the table has nothing of its own. The whole and every detail about the table is the Dvar Hashem, the godly energy, which is vitalizing the table and making look the table the way it is. Is an interesting example, perhaps, maybe to be said over here. In other words, so let's say, just for argument's sake, maybe Hashem, put in the very beginning when He created the world, He stuffed it in a certain energy into creation, and that's about it. So that energy that Hashem placed into creation 5,774 years ago, it's true, it began from Hashem, and true, it's Hashem's energy, but after all, it's been such a long time, so creation, gained its like, you put somebody, you're in charge of somebody, but after a while, the other person gets a bit comfortable. He came into the room that he was completely under the dominion of person A, but after, they get used to the environment, they get used to each other, and each one gets to see each other's space, and then eventually the other person doesn't feel subordinate to the one who's in charge of them all the time. He gets comfortable in his own place. So apparently, let's say the same thing, true, when Hashem created the world, you felt the dependence of everything in the face of Hashem. So then it was all still, the first 6 days of creation is all about God, because you felt God's energy, which is pumped into creation on a constant basis. Hashem said, let there be light, there was light. Right away you felt the connection of the light, or the sun, the illuminators, the sun, the moon, with God. And you felt Hashem would pull back, there won't be a moon, there won't be a sun. So you felt that connection between Creator and this which He created, or which came from, emanated from Him. But after that, there's 6,000 years, they got every part of creation got comfortable in its function for so many years. So maybe now it's a bit of contradiction. Maybe now the notion of Hashem Echad is not exactly the way it was when Hashem created the world, because then you felt the connection of the creation to its Creator. Now again, it's 5,774 years later. It's, that's the status quo. Maybe makes something, changes the reality of Hashem Echad, still in charge. I'm not talking about Hashem being in charge. Nobody argues Hashem is in charge. But to say they're insignificant means to say that, their dependence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the same that when Hashem created the world. And the answer is yes, indeed, absolutely. That's what we say every single day in davening. Means that it's not that Hashem created the world 5,774 years ago and just things are the way it is. Every day, and another Rebbe brings other places, says not only b'chol yom, but every rega, every moment Hashem is pumping in this energy into creation. And what do we gain? We know that itself tells us how every moment, in other words, how every moment the world is really not. Because it's so dependent on the pump, and if Hashem skips one pump, it becomes nothing. So when you know that your next second, your next breath is by clear, deliberate decision of God to pump this into you, everything about you is really not. Or you stand in constant demonstration. Inevitably, you stand in a state that Hashem is giving me my next breath, so I have no existence on my own. Hence, I'm just a mere extension of God's energy. So again, Hashem Echad, there's only God in the end. That's why we say again, we say it's in every nusach. Mechadish b'tuvi, Hashem not only created the world 6,000 years ago, but He creates the world on a constant basis. Mechadish b'tuvi v'chol yom tamid ma'asav bereishis. Every day He pumps in again. Al Rebbe adds v'chol rega v'rega. Every moment He, not in our nusach, but in discourse of Chassidus, Al Rebbe says the message, what we say in davening, doesn't refer only to every day. It means every moment Hashem is pumping in, just like in the day when He created the world. You saw that kind of that pump which Hashem said or uttered, the words. Again, not the words we understand the composition of words in our mind, but Hashem, words meaning energy, expression. Hashem expressed Himself, Yehi Ayr, and there was light. Hashem says every moment Yehi Ayr. And the moment Hashem stops to say Yehi Ayr, the sun would disappear. So does the sun have any existence, any entity, any independence? Its next pump of breath is just waiting to exist, not only to function. Like you say, function weaker, like we say the tape recorder. Function weaker, function strong. No, it just to exist, it's waiting for the next pump of Hashem. Is there any sun? There's no sun, everything is about God. Just to add, why, it's after the time. Okay, so we just add, we'll stop over here, but why are we compelled to say so? Why are we compelled to say that I'm Mechadish b'tuvi b'chol yom tov in ma'asav bereishis? Maybe Hashem did create the world thousands of years ago, and it just remained on its own. In reality, if we say it, this is the way it is. And again, we know it so clearly when Yid experiences any miracle or any hashgacha pratis, divine providence. The only reason is because Hashem. It's not like, oh, how did Hashem get there? It was just so far from the shul, from many, because everything that there is really not that. It's just ultimately the energy of Hashem. So Hashem decided to express His energy in a way that should make a difference for you. That's why you saw the Hashgacha Pratis. And there's a reality we know, but ideally, what is compelling us to say that it's so? Why can't we just say Hashem created the world 6,000 years ago, 5,774 years ago? He says, it's explained in a number of places. Take something, for example, take a ball, throw it upwards. So usually everything gravitates outwards. This is Mashal brought in Chassidus, which explains this idea. So you throw the ball, again, you open your hand, the ball will fall downwards. Take the ball and throw it up, so it's flying upwards. But does it become like a flying ball that continues to go upward? The answer is no. It'll come a certain point that it'll slow down, and again it'll fall downwards. As high as you're going to throw it, best ball player, as high as you're going to throw it, you're going to put a lot of energy, and but it's never going to become a flying ball, which is it would change its nature and just head on high without interruption, without flying. At a certain point it will slow down and it'll fall. And the question is why? If it flew, you see that it went in the opposite direction of its original nature, so why isn't it flying without it? Why is it stopping? Because the answer is, it didn't change the nature of the ball, as similar to the nature of everything, which gravitates downwards. So the exclusion of fire, like we spoke the other day in the Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. But again, it has the same reason the fire ascends on high, because again, that's its shadish. The source of the fire is on high. That's why it gravitates. It ascends to its source as well. But the reason why everything gravitates downwards, except the exclusion of fire, is because everything returns once it gravitates to its own shadish umakar, to its root, to its source. In this case, you see the ball is doing opposite, but it's not essentially. It essentially changed, reformed from its original nature. It still has the same nature to gravitate downwards. The only thing is, you're pushing it. You infused a certain force into the ball to do opposite than its nature.